Right, I'm going to start with the Irish Times here. It's no surprise, all focusing on the Manchester derby tonight. The excoriation of United's players ensures a big Derby Day response, and a related story comes on the back of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's comments 24 hours ago about the Manchester City players who will be biting at your heels, biting at your ankles. Guardiola says Solskjaer is trying to influence the referee. City manager angered by the suggestion that his players repeatedly commit fouls. I mean, there's absolutely nothing in this really, but it's the usual nonsense you get in a little bit of a build-up to a derby game.
Yeah.
It's going to be an interesting one tonight. I think a lot of Manchester United fans are just going to find a rock to crawl under and pretend this whole thing isn't happening, because there are some United fans that would see a United victory tonight or a draw as not necessarily being a great thing. If they produce a response to that debacle that was Goodison Park on Sunday afternoon, put it up to City, show a bit more about themselves, get a point or 3 points, you've essentially handed the title to Liverpool. Isn't that would that be the case in your view?
Yeah, but do they not want to finish fourth, you know?
I would think the United's chances of finishing fourth at the moment, while the table implies that there is still a considerable possibility of them finishing top four. That late Ericsson strike last night, I don't think United are catching Tottenham, and they have Chelsea this weekend. They could finish above Chelsea even with a defeat tonight. I just think it's unlikely.
It's unlikely.
The run-in that Arsenal have as well.
Like, really, they should be more worried about finishing top four than Liverpool winning the league. Now, maybe it doesn't work like that, but to finish in the Champions League is... When Solskjaer came in, the Champions League, the FA Cup, and finished in top four, and it's likely they're going to fail on all fronts there, and they should be looking to finish top four. And with how badly their three rivals performed at the weekend in terms of the top four race, there is still hope. Chelsea don't really look convincing. Clearly, Arsenal are far from convincing at the moment. Spurs should be okay, but I don't know. I've no faith whatsoever in them getting a result tonight. I think Liverpool have been desperately unlucky in the way the cards have been dealt at the end, in the sense that Spurs beating Man City in the Champions League just wasn't ideal for them, trying to beat them again on Saturday. And Man United are just a shit show at the moment. You know, they're losing form at completely the wrong time for Liverpool, because Man City did have notionally a tough title race, a tough title kind of last few games, but this doesn't look tough at the moment.
No. What have you got there?
Yeah, this is the United way off the pace, Ole. This is the Herald, which is obviously self-explanatory, croning up against the clock in terms of getting back for the final against Arsens. Obviously suffered an injury in a fairly bruising encounter. And Electricity League, Dinny's Derby Delight. It's good to see the Herald with a bit of bows on the back page, so plenty there. And obviously tributes to the Lisbon line as well. Billy McNeil, lovely gesture from Shamrock Rovers last night, where they played I forget the song that glorifies the Celtic 1967 team, but they played that in tribute to Billy McNeil before the game, and their use of music before the game for a crowd that was building up, unusual for a League of Ireland game, was excellent, and I thought that was a lovely touch to honour Billy McNeil. Yeah,
there are one or two other stadia which shall remain nameless that might learn a lesson or two from that in terms of trying to build a fake atmosphere, maybe complement the atmosphere that's already building, as you've described it there. The Irish Daily Mail this morning, GAA under fire, and we've just referenced it briefly. Furious club is banned over charity match. Donegal All-Ireland winning defender Eamon McGee has condemned GAA authorities for handing out an 8-week ban to a local club for hosting a charity fundraiser. We're going to get stuck into that story in a little more detail with Chris McNulty later in the show, but it's an interesting one. The temptation in these situations is to go lunge 2 foot in at the GAA without maybe getting our hands on the facts and the detail first. So before any of us do that and accuse them of getting themselves involved in another unmitigated PR disaster, I think it's probably fair on everybody just to go through the detail a bit more before we do that. Munster needs Zebo back, says O'Gara. Ron O'Gara was on off the ball yesterday saying that he would like to see Simon Zebo return to the club, and that there are some burnt bridges to be mended. I hope I'm not misquoting Rog on that one, but I don't know, there's more to that as well. I don't think it was a case that Simon Zebo fell out with Munster. I think it was a case that he wanted a new experience, probably didn't see his future with the Ireland team in as much of a degree as other Irish internationals over the last few years, and it's not like he's not having a spectacular season. He can't stop scoring tries, and Racing have had a really good European season, getting to the quarters, and they're very much in a position to go deep into the playoffs in the top 14 as well. What's next for yourself?
Yeah, we have the Sun here. It's all kicking off. United boss Warren Stars flop again, and you'll get the boot. I think that's the interesting narrative that Liverpool can kind of cling to in terms of Manchester United tonight, that the players are under pressure. Angry Guardiola hits back as all his tactical fouls jibe. Just on that, I read an article yesterday in the Times, and basically, I think the point of the article was there's literally, I think, one player Man United would be sad to see kind of go at the end of the season, and the rest they'd be like, nah.
That being David De Gea.
Rashford, actually.
Rashford, right.
And
I think De Gea's form hasn't even been great over the last
and I think with De Gea maybe they expected, but that's the only thing I think Liverpool have in their favour tonight, is that these players are sort of playing for their future, some of them. Now I think Solskjaer will have already decided that some of these lads are gone, definitely. If Pogba is in that or not is probably the main question, but that's the only thing they're going, because they shamed themselves against Everton and they have to produce a reaction. I'm just not sure the reaction will be anywhere near good enough.
Well, you have to think if they get a fee of about 80 or 90 million for Paul Pogba and he wants to go, I'm not sure anyone at Manchester United would stand in his way, because it's...
Surely get that, would they not, at the very least?
You would imagine if it's Real, for example, that are coming calling, can probably get them to pay top dollar. At the back of the Racing Post, as big as it gets, City can take huge step towards title with victory at Old Trafford. We'll talk about this with Gary Breen in a few minutes, but you could make an argument that tonight is the title.
Yeah.
City win tonight, they're going to win the league. City don't win tonight, Liverpool are going to win the league. I expect the two teams are of such high quality. Liverpool have really found their feet again. They're playing very good football. All of their games over the last month, they've had to dig it out. Yeah, they've shown real title winning ability over the last month. I think they'll win out, and I think City win out.
Yeah, it's been a hugely successful season for Liverpool regardless. You can't control stuff like how many points Man City get, apart from the two games you play against them. If they finish on 97 points, I think it's way better than Man United's best ever tally when they won the league. I think
it'll be more points than Liverpool have ever won in our lifetime.
Yeah, and
the prospect of them not winning the league is quite ridiculous. Fire on through the rest of them there, and we'll get stuck into all that.
It's a successful season anyway. And the nasty neighbours, Mirror Sports, Ole, they will snap at your ankles and kick you. The ref must watch it. Did he say that, Pep? I've never sent a player out to foul anyone. Z. And then on to the Times with Shane Long on the back. Cronin and Ruddock may miss cup final in relation to Leinster. Obviously the Shane Long story is something that we shouldn't underestimate as well. With McGoldrick being brilliant for Sheffield United the other day, Long is a reminder that he hasn't gone away, and FIFA has declined to comment about the prospect of it appointing a normalisation committee to steer Irish football out of troubled waters. And John Fallon, that's actually a very interesting story as well, where they're going in that regard. And that was the Mirror before that. Okay, this is the Daily Telegraph. Guardiola cries foul over Solskjaer, claims so more of the same nonsense really ahead of this game tonight. And Eriksen to the rescue. Brilliant strike from Christian Eriksen last night against Brighton. Late winner keeps Spurs on course for a top four finish, because again, another thing that maybe Arsenal fans, Chelsea fans, Manchester United fans would have been wary of over the last few weeks, given that Tottenham's league form started to totter a little. They got to a Champions League semi-final. There was the possibility Tottenham were going to finish fifth, and due to either a Chelsea, Arsenal or United, what Chelsea did to Tottenham in 2012 when Tottenham finished fourth and ended up not playing in the Champions League the following season. So that possibility has receded significantly after that victory over Brighton last night. Absolutely. Brighton still kind of just holding on in there. Obviously the Indo as well, I've got to give used to work for the Indo, and I know the work they would have done. John Moore has just left the Indo offices now. It was funny because I thought his print was all over this, getting that crucial photo of the league race, was it or not a handball, back page, last knock-ons before the paper goes to print. Guardiola hits back at claims of strategic City fouling, and Rovers again hit by Gypsy Curse. Yeah, and finally for the papers here at the back of the Guardian, Guardiola hits back over Solskjaer and the foul claims. Let's not go into that anymore. And then Eriksen rocks Brighton. Houghton's men punished by Spurs, while Long creates Premier League history with 7-second goal. There is a mention on two of the big stories. One was covered on Off the Ball with Joe and Ken Doherty last night. Amateur hour, snooker shock as outsider Cahill. I assume is it Cahill? He's an amateur as well. He came through the qualifiers last week. It's quite brilliant. Held his nerve to beat Ronnie O'Sullivan, the world number one and the 5-time world champion, 10 frames to 8. And Billy McNeil, farewell to a Celtic legend who roared with the Lisbon Lions. The snooker one is interesting. It's a spectacular opening round. There's the Irish news as well for our viewers on offtheball.com. It was an honour to play for Billy McNeil, says Rogan. I mean, he's
he is a legend of the club. The Lisbon Lions, there are not as many of them around now as there would have been. It's a big story every time one of them passes away because they achieve so much, and all that story about them all being born within 3 miles of Parkhead and what they had to overcome to go and win that championship and been the first British club to win the old European Cup.
Proper football days when the club really was, represented by local players and that.
And there was a connection between the players and the locals. Yes, they were probably earning above the average industrial wage, but it wasn't stratospheric like it is now. And I mean, what the ordinary Joe earns bears absolutely no relation to what the likes of the Premier League stars are earning at the moment.
That's without harping on. That's again, I think, why this Bohs team is so popular. They're basically on an average wage, if even. They're kind of part-time. Keith Ward, I've seen him in town kicking beer barrels into the cellar. That's his day job, and then he comes on and plays outrageously well second half last night at times. And they're local Dublin lads. They come from different backgrounds, but they're dubs. They're basically Keith Buckley cycles home from games at times, takes selfies of himself cycling home from games in Tala with all the Bohs fans behind him in the Lewis. It's a lovely story, and it's kind of anomalous in football nowadays.
Yeah, something very romantic about that. That is it for the sports page this morning. Just want to touch on a couple of those stories. I want to talk about the rugby injuries in a sec, but the Ronnie O'Sullivan one, it's a huge story, and it's a spectacular way to kick off the week or the 2-week spell at the Crucible, but at the same time, you've lost Ronnie O'Sullivan.
I know, yeah. I was reading the Times had a great piece with Jimmy White yesterday, and Jimmy White was going on about playing Alex Higgins, and Alex Higgins, how much drink he'd have on him, and really old style snooker days. But he basically said down the piece, I fancy Ronnie to do it this year. And while I was reading this, he was actually losing out to an amateur, and the stars have definitely aligned now for some of the other players on the other side of the draw as well, or on that side of the draw rather, because it's in terms of trying to promote the game, it was a great story, but you want Ronnie there. Obviously, you definitely want Ronnie there. But it's a fascinating tournament this year.
Yeah, for the casual snooker fan, they probably wouldn't have tuned in maybe until week 2, and you want to see Ronnie there. Now, I don't watch the snooker anywhere near as much as I used to, but I used to absolutely love Ronnie. I loved watching Jimmy White. I loved watching Alex Higgins. There aren't as many of those. It's the old cliche I'll throw out. There aren't as many of those characters in the game anymore. But I really wanted to see him, join Steve Davis in 6 and get himself a year closer to maybe joining Stephen Hendry on 7. It's hard to believe that Ronnie O'Sullivan is the highest ranked snooker player in the world. 26 years? Did he win the UK Championship in '93? 26 years later, and he's still the world number 1, despite playing only a handful of tournaments every year. In order to keep his ranking as high as it is, he pretty much has to get to the quarterfinals, semis, and final of every tournament he enters.
Yeah, I guess the void created by his departure is partly filled by his conqueror, who now has become the romantic story of the tournament.
Yeah, well, let's see how far James Carroll can go, because he showed real ice cool demeanour as he won those last couple of frames. And Ronnie O'Sullivan afterwards talking about how he could barely keep his eyes open. He was nearly falling asleep in his chair. You mentioned Sean Cronin there in one of the back stories. That could be a massive blow to Leinster, because he's touch and go now for that Champions Cup final in Newcastle on the 11th of May. If he's not there, obviously James Tracy came off the bench and did a really good job against Toulouse at the weekend, but you are losing depth. They've already lost Levy. They've already lost Josh van der Fleer. You just fear for Leinster, because they have a couple of really big Pro 14 ties playing Ulster at the weekend. They just need to ensure that they don't lose any more key men before they get to this final, because Saracens, as Johnny Sexton said, it's going to be the battle of their careers.
Yeah, I'm obviously kind of only half up on this, but I guess the thing is, Saracens, the physical nature they're going to bring to the game as well, and it's going to ask an awful lot of Leinster. They've come through 2 very tough games. The Ulster game, I really thought they kind of wobbled through that. The Toulouse game was an awful lot closer than the scoreline suggests. That interception towards the end. Toulouse brought a big game to the Aviva Stadium, and you can tell there's a lot of war wounds out there, but Leinster have a great mental fortitude. I think they get over the line, and that game's going to be a rugby game like that in St James's Park. I think that's going to be a great experience.
Yeah, they know how to win. You mentioned the Ulster game there. The man who got the try that will clinch that game as well, Adam Byrne, he's missing for the rest of the season as well. So they can't really afford to lose anymore, and they've still got a couple of massive games to go before they start turning their attention to what's going to be happening in that game against Saracens in a couple of weeks' time.